I think that extraordinary lives lead to extraordinary art. And in the case of this person I'm talking to today, that is so true, because there's a depth and a realness to the music that she makes. So please, welcome to the stage the very, very, very talented Ngaiire.
Hello, everyone. So I was born in a little town called Lae. It wasn't quite a village. It was the second largest city in Papua New Guinea. And Papua New Guinea has over 850 different tribes. And connected to all those tribes, there are over 850 living languages, which makes it the most diverse country linguistically in the world. So I grew up in a household of 4 languages, including English and Tokpisin, which is a Creole mixture of Portuguese, German, Malay and English.
And so when did you know? Was there a moment that you knew you could sing? Because, you know, it's a gift, your voice, I think. And you were involved with the church a lot as well, weren't you?
I don't think there was an exact moment where I knew that I could sing. I think it was a thing that I did out of survival. There wasn't any child psychology programs around during that time. No one really believed in that in PNG. You kind of rely on your family support system and your tribes.
Do you feel, not obligated, but do you feel you should include part of your traditional heritage in your music now?
I don't think anyone should feel obligated to do anything, really, but I definitely feel that as I get older, I feel the need to want to connect back to my heritage, because without that, I mean, you're kind of just wandering around not really knowing about your roots, and that's really important. So it's more a desire for me to be able to connect back to that.
Because your voice is so much part of what you do, how do lyrics equate as part of the equation? Are they as important?
They are. It's been quite a journey for me as a songwriter, because when I first started out, wasn't really writing in a pop sense. I was always writing things that were really quite strange and metaphorically absurd, and things that people didn't really understand what I was talking about. And for me, it was a very insular process for me. And it's only the last couple of years that I've kind of moved into the direction of going, okay, maybe people do need to connect to what I'm singing about, or what I'm talking about. So it is very important. Lyrics are very important.
Tell me about your process. How does it begin?
So it's changed over the last couple of years. When I first started out, I was writing a lot on keyboard and guitar and ukulele. So it was all very organic, and I was writing everything by myself. And I've been doing it for about nearly 15 years now. So I've learnt a lot from other artists, and I've seen how things have changed, and now I'm writing with a lot of producers, so I'm getting tracks sent to me and being more collaborative than just me sitting in my room writing songs.
You're also a complete artist, I see you as. It's a visual thing. I know you paint as well. Was there a moment where that came from, you realised you had to do more than just be a musician?
As an independent artist, I learnt quite early on that I couldn't really rely on someone signing me to an A&R deal and developing me over time. I had to kind of create those opportunities by myself. And something that I did years ago, which doesn't exist anymore, which was what was called the Seed Fund, and it used to be called JB Seed Fund. And I did that as a self-managed artist. And I learnt so much about being an artist who's doing it by myself, and that empowered me a lot to think about what I can do, what's in my power to do as an artist. So I became very interested in strategizing and figuring out how to make myself more employable and more attractive in the industry. So
I know that your first show was watching my band, which was terrifying to you. I think I was in a band called Machine Gun Fellatio, and I don't think any kid should have witnessed that. But somehow, I think you probably learnt what not to do from that.
So his band was the first ever live band I ever saw in my life. So, and I'd only been in Australia for about 2 years, I think. Had just moved over from PNG. So I had gotten special permission from my mother through a friend of mine who'd come to my house and begged my mum to let me go to your concert. And we rocked up, and there was like this giant sheep with a baby's head on stage, and everyone was fucking the sheep. And if you actually
At least I got clothes on this time.
If you grasp how crazy that would have been for me, like having never experienced live music, but also never experienced that, I was like, that's interesting. That's what you can do on stage, right? Okay.
Writing for you, is it natural, or are you one of those people that has to get out of your comfort zone to ignite the idea?
I used to feel like I couldn't write without having my heart broken or feeling really horrible about myself. But it's all growth as an artist and as a songwriter, and working with people like Meghan Washington and Paul Mack, and who are so good at just churning songs out, and not just songs like pop songs or even just songs where the lyrical content is so perfect. Collaborating with people like that really encouraged me to kind of step outside of that and conceptualize what I'm writing about a lot more. So,
when you get an audience, as you have, does it affect the writing?
I would be lying if I said that it didn't. It definitely does. I mean, I've always thought about how I would survive and sustain myself as an artist. So you kind of have to, and you kind of have to find that real sweet spot with making money and catering, or being true to yourself and also catering to your audience.
Can I get a songwriting tip from you?
I was having a bit of a creative block for this new album that I'm working on, and I read somewhere that Sia said that people think that she's incredible. She writes all these amazing songs and it seems like it comes real easy, but she said, I'm not that amazing, I'm just very productive. And that really spoke volumes to me because, for me as a perfectionist, I expect every song that I write to be a hit, and it doesn't always happen that way, and I agonize over it and go, why isn't this working? And it's okay to write a shit song, it's okay to write 5 songs in a day and none of them be okay.
APRA has put this event on today. APRA, if you don't know who they are these saviours to every musician in Australia. They collect royalties, they give them out, they do so much, and they do events like this to help train musicians, but they also give out grants, which are these PDAs, which I got to give you a chunk of money at the PDAs last year, which I felt like Oprah, which was... how did that affect your career, getting that injection of cash? How much was it? I've forgotten.
I think it was about 15.
Yeah, that's
15, yeah.
Which is a lot. That's like 5 years' work to a musician.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible.
How did it affect your career?
When you make an album, you have a budget and you think, okay, this is going to be fine. I'm going to do this, mix it, master it, and there's always more to do. You always want to tweak things and work on a song for the 100th time again. So I had run out of money for my last album, and I basically just tied up a few loose ends, very, very expensive loose ends, and and it's only the last 2-3 years that I become profitable as a musician, so that definitely helped me get to the stage where I don't have to work a normal job ever again.
Excellent. Thank you, APRA. So you got you there.
No.
And this last album you did, just sidetracking for a second, you were about to give up music before that, which is, I'm sure every artist goes through. How did you work through that? Because I listened to that album, and you're in full flight on that new album. It doesn't sound like someone walking away.
I'd never had that feeling before, of feeling like music didn't really matter anymore, and I felt worthless about what I was contributing. And it was a real shock for me to feel that way, because I'd always been quite focused on where I was going. So I think when you're in those positions, you just kind of have to be aware and self-aware of what that period is.
We hear a lot about the gender inequality in all workplaces, but also in the music industry. You've done soundscapes for Mona in Tassie. You've made albums, videos. You play Glastonbury. You've opened the Pacific Games. Has it been a struggle for you as a woman, do you think, in this industry?
It's a really interesting question, and I always feel like I should say yes because it's such a huge conversation right now, and it's a conversation that does need to happen. But if I'm being completely honest, it's never been an obvious hindrance for me, and it could just be ignorance, but for me, I feel like coming from the background that I have come from and the country that I came from, what my mother and I had experienced in terms of gender inequality was far more aggressive and far more traumatic than what I've experienced here. So for me, it's been a walk in the park because...
Because you were raised not to make eye contact, is that right? There's a whole lot of whole traditional...
I couldn't make eye contact with people for about 2 years because you just wouldn't look a man in the eye because it was disrespectful. So, it's... If we're talking about hindrances, I think what was a hindrance for me was more racism than being a woman, which is something that I definitely felt over the course of my career.
In what way? Have you got an example?
The weird thing is that I didn't know what the word racism was until I came to this country, and mostly because growing up in PNG, you're around other black/brown people already, so you don't know what that means. And there is racism there, but it's more regionalism between tribes and regions. So having the whole like, oh, you're black, you're white, you're this, like that, that wasn't a thing. So I think I started to wise up to that when festivals would book me, but they'd always put me on the Indigenous stage. And I started to think, my music can easily, be presented on a contemporary stage or even the main stage, and why do they keep pushing me in the corner? And it was mostly because people were ignorant, and it also came down to the meetings that I had with labels and booking agencies and promoters who always never knew what to do with me because I was so eclectic, and I had this really eclectic background, and I didn't look African, I didn't look African American, I'm not Indigenous Australian, and so I always felt like no one really knew what to do with me, like, oh, we'll just segregate her to the Indigenous stage and that'll be fine, she'll be happy to play there.
You worked, as you mentioned, with Meghan Washington and Paul Mack. What specifically do you think you got from that process? Because they're different people, but they are lovers of pop, aren't they?
I got different things because Paul I've known since I was a teenager, and he's been my mentor for such a long time. Most things that I've learned about being a performer and a songwriter, I've learned from Paul. What I learned from Meghan, when you watch her write, you can see the words basically just pour out of her brain, and she's just constantly honing in on her craft and doesn't let up. Like she needs to write, she needs to think about words, and she definitely gave me more of an appreciation and love for words.
Your parents wanted you to be an astronaut, is that right?
No, my parents just didn't want me to do music.
See, I've seen you say that. I've watched an interview where you said my parents wanted me to be an astronaut.
No,
and I wondered how they felt now.
They just wanted me to do something that was a little bit more stable. And they didn't know I could sing for a very long time. So because they're both academics and always doing amazing things, they wanted me to do something that was more science-based and kind of reach for the stars kind of job. So
I imagine you as an engineer. Doesn't seem to...
No, I don't think I was smart enough for that. But I definitely thought maybe being an astronaut would be impressive for them. So
shit.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've done okay. Are they proud now? Do they get it now?
They are. They're super proud.
Look, I want to open up to some questions from you guys.
Do you have a pre-gig ritual that you do before you go up on stage?
I do. I try to do some stretches beforehand. That always helps me because you're always sitting before a gig or waiting. And I was just telling Chit Chat that I usually have a bit of whiskey before I get on stage, which isn't a healthy choice, but it definitely helps soothe my vocals. Obviously, you do some warm-ups with the backing vocalists. What else do I do? And then we do a little chant, which is a chant that my grandmother taught me when we were kids.
I just wanted to ask whether, with your music, whether you have the song as a complete thing before you go into the studio, Or do you go into the studio with a rough idea and then kind of let the magic happen once you're in the studio?
It changes all the time. So, say for instance, the last album, it was me, Paul Mack, and a guy called Jack Grace, who were all kind of writing at the same time. So we'd individually bring songs into the studio and work out who could best contribute to the track. Or else we'd start something afresh in the studio. So it's always different.
Does your music inspire your painting or your painting inspire your music?
I haven't painted for a very long time because I've been so immersed in music. So it's something that I am always sad about and always upset that I don't get the time to do or don't have the energy to do after I've been on tour. But I think looking at other people's paintings does inspire me a lot. And I definitely feel like if I had the time to continue painting, it would definitely have that correlation and inspire each other, and that's something that I definitely want to do a lot more of.
Your music inspires my art directly.
That's gorgeous. It's hard to serve two masters, though, I think. You know, when you're doing music, you either lose yourself or you're doing painting, and once you divide that, you can't give the same amount of energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you had the chance to write with anyone, who would that be?
That would hands down be Bjork. I'd love to. I mean, we don't even have to write. We can just make something, you know.
When you had sort of established yourself as an artist as much as you could do by yourself, when was that? And when you needed sort of further management, did you go looking for it, or did they come and find you after you made yourself available?
I definitely went looking for it. I was the person that sent multiple emails all the time, every time, to the same people over and over again, and to the point where I would even change my name so that they would think that somebody else was emailing them. Yeah, it wasn't until I started to get played on the radio and started to get booked by all these noticeable festivals that people started to come to me and go, "Oh, what are you doing? You know, maybe we can have a coffee or meet up." But yeah, that didn't really happen where I felt like an established artist until 3 years ago. I mean, some might argue that it was earlier than that, but I definitely felt like I was more established, funnily enough, when I got full rotation on Triple J. So, yeah.
What made you consider quitting music, and what made you actually decide, oh, I think I'm going to continue on?
I'd been doing music for a very long time, and I felt like no one was really paying attention. I had a small following and people who were really passionate and believed in what I did. And I was working on the second album, and a lot of things had happened. There were a couple of deaths in my family. My brother got estranged from the family, and my partner, who was the producer of the first album, we kind of split up. So, yeah, it was a culmination of different things. I mean, life happens, so you just kind of have to roll with it. And it got to the stage where I just couldn't focus on the music. Everybody else that was contributing to the album was contributing, and I felt like I was in this rut and couldn't really contribute the way that I wanted to. And I thought, well, what is it then? Like, where do I go from here? Is this the end of the road? Like, we're not getting anywhere. Every musician has that moment where they think, how is it worth it? And I think the only way to get through that is to know that music will always find you regardless of where you're at. If that's what you're supposed to do, then it will make you do that. I think the best advice would be to not think that you know everything, and because we don't know everything, and I am always learning things and always feel like I don't know enough. And I think the thing that I learnt quite early on was that it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to feel like you're not as good as people around you. It's a natural human thing to feel. So As long as you focus on who you are as a person and who you are as an artist and focused on doing that, it doesn't matter about anybody else.
Thank you so much for coming along, and please put your hands together for Ngaiire.
Thank you.